Welcome everyone that's on the webinar. It's nice to see some old friends and colleagues in that list there. Good to see your names. Be great to see your faces. My name is Alex Bullock. For those that don't know me, I'm VP of Revenue here at ITG Commerce, and welcome today to Composable Commerce and Content with Cocktails, presented by ITG and Contentful. Just very quickly, a little bit about us, ITG. Think of ourselves as commerce problem solvers. We're a 60-ish person company here that has spent the last decade implementing a variety of commerce platforms. Probably most well known in the Magento and Adobe space, and have a huge amount of our team certified in Magento. We're also a shopware partner, and over the last 10 years, we've done over 100 successful e-commerce projects. And that's probably enough about us for today. We didn't come here to pitch you guys on us. We came here to talk composable commerce and get into a bit more details on that front. So let me introduce the folks that are here today. If we go to the next slide. So we've got Dina Apostolou from Contentful joining us. We've got Brian Walker and Bill Friend from Cocktails and Commerce. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brian and Bill, and we're going to go into the fun part of our webinar here today, the cocktails side of Cocktails and Commerce.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's all going to be fun. We're just adding to the fun.
That's true.
Cocktails.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Alex and ITG for having us here. I'm Brian Walker, joining you from my kitchen and / bar here in Seattle. Bill, a friend, my colleague and close friend, is joining from Santa Cruz. We're going to take you through some cocktails, and then we're going to get into talking about Contentful and headless content management and composability, and then have a really great discussion. Holly, if you wouldn't mind maybe moving on to the next slide, just really quick. Many of you know Bill and I. This is, of course, a picture of Bill and I when we were doing our Hugh Hefner and William S. Burroughs impersonations a few years ago. Bill and I are longtime commerce industry vets. Many of you know us. We've recently started really two different kinds of businesses. One is Strategy M. It's a strategic advisory firm focused on commerce technology and services organizations. And we started Cocktails and Commerce. That QR code you see there is a way to subscribe to our free newsletter. We write about cocktails. We write about commerce tech and the overall ecosystem. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Bill, maybe you could talk a little bit about what we're mixing today.
Yeah, sure. Let me introduce a little bit more of what the kit is that we sent you. And the idea with the kit is, again, some basic components, back to the composable commerce vibe, these different functional components to make cocktails around. There's Campari, there's sweet vermouth, and there's some orange bitters. And the idea is that you can match and pair those up with some different kinds of spirits. So if you have got some kind of bourbon, I actually like rye, potentially a little bit higher proof rye, to make a Boulevardier, which we'll talk about in a minute, or a gin. A London dry gin is a great way to go. There's some very botanical gins that maybe are better for different types of drinks, but just anything kind of simple there. We really like botanists, so that's what you see on the screen. You can use mezcal. These drinks are very pliable, and you can leverage any of your favorite kind of spirits to make them really interesting. So pull out your favorite spirit there. One of the things we're going to do, if you go to the next slide, we're going to show you some techniques to extend it even further. So again, for those who didn't get the kit, and maybe you've got a few bottles, especially if you've got some Campari and sweet vermouth, maybe we can guide you through some other types of ways to expand your capabilities. So just to be clear, Brian and I, we're not bartenders, we're enthusiasts, cocktail enthusiasts. We love mixology, and mixology is all about making something crafty, something really good tasting. And some of the keys to doing that is what we're going to take you through. So what you see here are the specs for making these drinks. And it's important to measure. If you go into a bar and they're just slapping the ingredients together, it's it's a crapshoot whether it's going to be what you're expecting. So on the left, you'll see I'm making a Boulevardier, and a Boulevardier, if you're familiar with a Negroni, is just a Negroni. Swap out the gin for bourbon or rye. And in this case, we're doing something called split modify, which Brian and I love to do to experiment with different flavors without changing the drink too dramatically. And in this case, I'm splitting the rye. Ooh, this is written kind of weird. The rye and the rum. So everything else is kind of the same. And again, what you'll find is that we also play around with bitters. So for me, I do have some orange bitters, but I've also got some other bitters. So if you're interested in getting a little bit more advanced, Dale de Graaf makes a great aromatic bitters, but the old standby is Angostura. So with that, when we want to start the drink here, just want to encourage you to grab any kind of vessel to stir the drink. This is a stirred cocktail. We're not going to shake it. Shaking and stirring is a way to get dilution and chilling the drink. And shaking is a faster way to get to something really cold, but it also aerates the drink quite a bit. And a lot of these kind of drinks, you don't want to aerate them so much. So I'm just have an example here. If you have a jar, I've got a beaker, anything like that. If you already have some way to strain the drink through, this is a Hawthorne strainer, some other options here. You're going to need something to stir the drink. And I've got my ice. And then there's a lot of different ways to measure. I don't know what you have, Brian. I definitely like these, I forget what the brand is on these, but it's a workhorse.
OXO. These are,
yeah,
I
there you
actually have
go.
the same. Yeah, I actually have the same one, Bill. These are little OXO, like,
I've used mine so much, it has some of the measurements are gone. But these are better, not better, these are fun because they have a lot of graduations on the inside, but you can just quickly get, 1 or 2 ounces or so on. So with that, let me get started. And I'm going to make, again, like we said here, I'm going to go off camera and pull out my sweet vermouth, get 1 ounce of this, and 1 ounce of, I'm using a little bit, I don't know if you call it overproof rye, but it's a little bit more proof than a typical 80. This is 100. And then there are some options for the rum. And I'm just going to show you 2. These are pretty common. You'll see these in bars. Smith & Cross is an overproof. So this is like 57% alcohol. This Diplomatico, and I think you have this too, Brian. I actually got this at Costco. I haven't seen it much recently, but this is about 40. And so I'm going to just use one again. So instead of, if you see it on the screen, it's 2 ounces. What we're doing is just 1 ounce. So it's really easy to take a 2-1-1 spec, which is 2 ounces of spirit, 1 of vermouth, 1 of Campari, and just split it. Then it's pretty much 1 of everything. So it's a basic approach and a ratio set for making drinks. And you could kind of step into any kind of bar and pull together some of these things and make that drink. So I'm going to go ahead and stir and get this ready. Brian, do you want to share a little bit about
just to add a couple things, and I'll get going
Sure.
on the Americano.
Yeah.
You notice that Bill hadn't added any ice yet to his beaker, and that's because he wanted to get all the pieces put into the beaker, all the different components, all the composable components into the beaker. If you don't have the rum and you're not doing a split, just double up on the, just do 2 ounces of the rye or bourbon, and you'll have that. If you have gin, I would say, do 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces of gin to make your Negroni, basically following along with what Bill did. I'm going to go ahead and make my Americano. Now, these little bottles that came along in the kit, these are actually about 1.5 ounces. So even though the recipe called for 1 ounce, I'm literally just going to use the whole bottle. Now, this is an equal spec. So the sweet vermouth, which in this case is the Carpano Antica, an excellent sweet vermouth, and the Campari, you can see I'm just literally adding them both to my glass. And then I'm going to top with some soda water or sparkling water. I'm going to go ahead and use this from my from my soda stream. Obviously, the Q-Tonic Club soda is excellent as well. I'm going to show you a little technique here really quick. The bar spoon, you'll notice that it has often this little twist to it. That's not just ornamental. And it's in cases like this where you actually put it upside down in the glass, and I'm going to add the water down the spoon. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is it actually carries the water, the mineral water, the sparkling water, all the way down the spoon to the bottom, and it'll actually mix from the bottom. So I don't actually have to just stir. I just literally do that. Now, to garnish my Americano, I'm going to take a little wedge of orange, and I'm just going to slice that off like so. And I'm actually going to squeeze the juice from a little bit of that wedge into the top, and then put my little wedge in the top. So that's the Americano. What's also important to just mention briefly about the Americano, this is a low ABV, a low alcohol cocktail. Now, I'm doing this one today partially because it's just a little after 1 on the West Coast, and I have some things I need to get done today. So this is a great aperitif, a great afternoon thing on a Saturday. Let's say it's a clear Saturday, you want a little drink, but maybe you don't want a beer, you don't want something heavy. Make yourself an Americano. It's lovely, and it's a great sipper, and you're not going to get as much alcohol. You're not going to get as intoxicated, and it's what we would call a low ABV cocktail. Bill, are you about ready to pour?
Yeah. Let me just mention a couple things here. One of the things I did is I added some ice and some water to my glass. Some people store their glasses in the freezer. They like them cold, but it gets pretty cold pretty fast using this technique. And I could just pour that out. Got a nice cold glass here. Use my Hawthorne strainer and basically pour this in, and just I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but that stirring gives it dilution, and dilution is really important. And typically stirring is going to get you about 20% dilution. So between that and chilling it down, you've got a nice cocktail. And in my case, I didn't see what you were using for garnish, but I've got this this peeler here, and I'm just going to use an orange peel here, and then you kind of bend it in half a little bit, get some of the aromatics from that, wipe the glass a little bit, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, wonderful. Cheers.
Cheers.
I hope everyone was able to mix along with us. Cheers to Composable Commerce and Content.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Now, as we sip this, I think it's great to kind of reflect on some of the history. One of the reasons why Bill and I love mixology is not just the great flavors and the great drinks and being able to make them at home, make them for our friends and family. It's also all the great history. So I just want to kind of, as we sip here, just talk briefly about the history of these cocktails. So the Americano, which is what, of course, I made, many of you hopefully made along with us here. This is a vermouth cocktail that really originated in the middle 1800s. So essentially the mid 19th century in Italy as a vermouth cocktail. And it was using, Italian orange bitters with sweet vermouth and often a little water to dilute it. Now, they didn't often have a lot of ice back then, but, they would try to, either drink it at room temperature, what we would today call a staffa, or add some ice if they happen to have some. Now, around the middle, in between World War I and say, 1920 or so, that's when Count Negroni, Pascal Olivier Negroni Riccardi, went into the Cafe Cassoni in Florence and said, you know what? I want you to replace the water with gin. And that's how we got the Negroni. Now, the Negroni as a cocktail became very prevalent, very widely drank across Europe, especially in places like France and in Paris. In fact, in Paris, many of the American writers who drank Negronis as they were having their cafe culture and talking about literature and great ideas and so forth, they called it, they said that Paris was a tricolor city. It was one part gin, one part Campari, one part sweet vermouth. Now, the Negroni kind of fell out of favor during World War II. due to the fact that all things Italian kind of fell out of favor in the West. But then when Italy went through the Renaissance, kind of in the 1960s, 1970s, what we would call la dolce vita, the Italian cinema became prevalent around the world, and Italian culture really became associated with sophistication and fashion and progressiveness. The Negroni was the drink that everyone sort of latched onto again, and it became the symbol of sort of sophistication. The Boulevardier that Bill made is a variation, of course, on both the Americano and the Negroni, and it's an example of composability in cocktails, and how mixology is really all about adapting and modifying and building on the history while subbing in different spirits and different modifiers to make that happen. So I hope you enjoyed your drinks today. If you didn't get a chance to mix along, subscribe to the newsletter, and we'll make sure we're talking about these drinks there, and certainly eager to help you on your mixology journey. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. That's a great segue along here into the next part of our Composable Commerce and Content webinar. So, yeah, maybe guys, before we dive into the panel here, I'm going to turn it over to Dina from Contentful to just give us a quick 2-minute introduction of Contentful, which also just sort of, sets the stage really well for the conversation we're going to have today about the content aspect of composable commerce. So over to you, Dina.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like that's a tough act to follow.
Dina, where's your drink?
Here's my drink.
Oh,
It's a mini. I
Cheers.
just said it has to be a mini drink because again, in the Pacific Northwest, it's only, a little past 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And as I told Bill, Alex, and Brian, I have carpool duties in a few hours. And so I'm going to be responsible.
Very good.
Yeah, exactly. But thanks so much for having me here to talk a little bit more about Contentful, but really just to join in on this conversation here because it is so pertinent coming off of Black Friday, Cyber Week, that we are having this conversation around composable commerce and kind of the path forward as we think about like the potential that's out there for customers and the market. So let me just do a little bit of setup for those of you that are less familiar with Contentful. The way that I would, you can go ahead and jump forward here around Contentful is that we're just kind of like resetting the conversation around the role of content. In this digital first world, and we all interact with watches, voice devices, or mobile, content really is serving all those customer experiences. And every week, these channels are emerging, right? And they're existing and they're continuing to evolve. And so we really look at this as that intersection of a customer experience. And you have to be so captivating in the moment of where users are and on what device that they're consuming content. And this is so incredibly important for brands. And this is how they're going to stand out and they're going to win in the market. AI is obviously creating the biggest shift, I would say, in technology in our lifetime, especially as you think about the way that content is processed and generated and analyzed. And it's going to obviously impact the way that customers and teams are thinking about content in the future. And so while some might think it's a hype cycle, we actually believe it to be real. Now, beyond the technology, let's not forget about, and if you just want to click through to the next slide, content and the journey of creating a great experience does rely on a team. Okay. And that is the people that really sit behind it. So if you just kind of advance there, the full digital team is behind it. And this is developers to marketers to designers to those that are managing the systems and the tech stack behind it. And really, it is that game sport that is really critical. We think that for everyone to do their best work, their needs need to be met in coordinated fashion, right? And so everyone has a piece of that process, and that's where process comes into play as well in terms of building out that experience, that desired experience, and bringing these experiences to life. All right, jumping to the next slide is really our premise is about how do you create that content one time and make it easier to create a shared library of content that's infinitely and instantly composable. The composability aspect of this empowers the teams to publish the right content to the right channel at the right time And this helps to ensure that experience is consistent no matter where someone is, whether it's a pre-purchase or during that purchasing experience, or frankly, even after. And because content, we think, needs to reside in a platform that allows you to manage it and modify it and deliver it, we think that your team can be a lot more efficient. Your company can be a lot more efficient, and your experiences can grow over time. Go ahead one click forward. So when you put this into context, and I talked about more of the end user state, which is on the far right, and I've talked about where teams come together, which is in the middle. Then there's the back end side, which is really on that left side. And we recognize, though, that content comes from a myriad of different systems and sources. And so the idea here is, how can your business have a centralized view of this thorny problem? And how can you get into this world of where you also don't need to migrate everything from one system to another? How can you let it coexist in those systems, but that the systems, have the content, have the data that can help you to be more intelligent and put it into context of that experience? And so that's why we've approached this from our platform, our composable platform, and we've gotten into the world of orchestration, because this is where you can make it more effortless from idea to execution, and you can direct your content to where you want it to go. And this helps your teams to connect it from anywhere to representing the brands, the channels, the regions that you need to be present in. And that's just a little bit about Contentful. If you just kind of round out here, we have kind of 3 different product lines. What I just kind of described to you is really the underpinning, and this is the platform. So if you want to move forward, this is really where we think structured content can deliver impactful experiences. We've gotten into a new area over the past year that is around helping those digital teams beyond the developer side to visually build, manage, and create experiences without having to go back to the technical teams. That's our Contentful Studio line. We'll talk a little bit more about that and what does this mean for business users in the future when we get into our panel discussion. And then, of course, our ecosystem of partners, and whether those are agencies to partners that are consulting and extending capabilities to build out that full stack. We rely on our partners around the world to help us to solve these problems for customers. And that's really how I guess I would sum it up to say, Contentful really allows businesses to unlock the power of digital content. We're seeing this in so many impressive ways. If we just want to round out, we serve thousands of customers around the globe. We're completing, some data and some points from Black Friday. It's quite amazing to see how many API calls we served in just the month of November. 90 billion, 3.6 billion just on Black Friday itself. And this is a huge increase year over year from what we saw. Of course, that's not even reflecting all the caching and all of that happens, kind of at that edge computing point. And so, wow, that really starts to, again, go back to setting the stage around how content really is the fuel around these experiences. So with that,
awesome.
I'm going to pass it back to you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Dina.
Yeah.
Holly, we can ditch the slides now. We're going to go right into kind of the heart of it here with our panel discussion. So, kind of got a few topics and questions for us all to discuss, and please, everyone, jump in and debate. But Brian, this first one I'm going to kind of point in your direction. So, we've been thinking a lot lately about how businesses on legacy platforms like Magento and Adobe Commerce might start a journey into composable. But without starting from scratch. So what are some of the natural places for a business to get started on their composable journey?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, composability is not necessarily new in the sense that many organizations have been bringing point solutions to bear around their e-commerce businesses to enhance certain areas. But of course, with composable architectures and orchestration capabilities and an API first set of products, it becomes much, much easier to blend in capabilities to complement what you may be getting from your core commerce platform. And I think there's really maybe 3 that I would highlight to answer your question, Alex. I think one is certainly content. Commerce platforms typically are not real strong at supporting content updates to homepages, landing pages, category pages, etc. And certainly when you start thinking about multiple different environments you want to be publishing content to, it can become clunky and a bit onerous, and doesn't necessarily have the workflow tools and other things that you may need as your business has grown and as your teams have grown, as Dina was sharing earlier. So content is very naturally one of those places. So it makes sense that we're talking about content here in the context of composable commerce. I'd also say search is another very natural place that many people would look to enhance what they may be getting from their commerce platform. And there's a range of different providers out there, obviously, who are providing now robust search capability via API and can be plugged into the e-commerce experiences that you're delivering. And then maybe one other to highlight would be, for example, personalization and the ability to capture and leverage customer data across your marketing channels, across your site experience, and then start to personalize the content you're delivering, as well as the products and the assortment and even the categorization and search results within your website. And again, a range of solution providers out there that you'd want to maybe explore. But those are three very natural areas. There's many others, of course, that would also potentially make a lot of sense. But those are three that I'd highlight.
Hey, maybe I can add one more. I know, like you said, Brian, there's a lot, but I think you're seeing a lot of people look for tools to help them with their catalog as they get extended catalog and granular attribution and other things that they want to manage, or even the need to manage catalog items that may not be in their core catalog. They're with a partner as part of a marketplace or things like that. So I think that's an area I'm seeing a lot as well.
Absolutely.
You got any thoughts on starting places?
I was going to say, if I was to put it in the context of like the easiest place to start, it's something that Brian said, which is likely more around like the search side, right? And that's a great kind of starting off point that might not be as thorny as you dealing like direct with a system, like a commerce system. But, I think, and we'll talk more about this, which is, the ability to start small and prove success in increments is kind of key, right? Show how moving to a more modern or composable approach in context that will drive like the right, conversion metrics that you need to prove, but without it actually having to like rip and replace something is going to be, I think, key, and also probably less scary to go and conquer for your first project.
I'm going to actually add to this as well. I had a fun conversation last week with the guys at Bold, and around a bunch of different topics, but they were actually talking about like a PCI compliant checkout option for customers that are still on Magento 1. And I'm like, well, that's interesting to think about. Like you could even start being composable from from a very, very old unsupported system if that was what you needed to do to be PCI compliant in 2023. So
Absolutely.
Another way to look at it. Yeah.
Well, what I like about that comment is that I think that, all of us kind of go to these categories, these areas where, there's products that do the whole category. But I think as things start moving towards a more composable future, you'll see just basic capabilities like inventory availability. And it's a service, and those services can drive all kinds of use cases. So when companies pivot more towards what are more advanced user journeys that they can support, they can think about what's the end experience they're trying to deliver and leverage the different capabilities that they already have, or just add just one to make those more advanced, because that's really what it's about.
Yeah. Well, Bill, that's a good segue here. I got the next question for you to kick us off on here. So, legacy commerce platforms are not content management systems, but many try to use them that way. How should Magento shops think about improving this without making a big investment in AEM? And I think what I'm trying to ask here is like Adobe's clearly got a composable and content management play with AEM at the forefront of that. But what about the enormous amount of businesses that are powered by Magento that are maybe a fit for Magento, but not a fit for AEM? Where do they go?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. There's so many factors that are going to send you one way or another. I think the most common thing that I've seen as a struggle is that, they've started with Magento and the specific capabilities that allow them to drive an experience are under the umbrella of something called Page Builder, which isn't an end-to-end CMS, to your point,
Mhm.
but it has a lot of capabilities to drive a website experience. But at the end of the day, people need to engage with people wherever they are. And, it's really a mobile first world. And it's not just mobile, but these tools to really accommodate all the different requirements around channel and other things. And actually, Dina mentioned it as well. Integrating content that lives in other systems. I think they really should be thinking on what's their headless strategy. And again, I think the reality is that it depends on their business and the business case for what digital experience are the most important to optimize and invest in. So, they're going to probably be hard pressed in justifying a full AEM. AEM is built to solve problems for larger organizations, and we're going to see a lot of folks that don't have that kind of structure where they've got 20, 30 different people and all these different flows, but they do have content in different systems. So, it might be something like Contentful, something that's a more modern architecture that you can adopt, a component of it to address the types of user journeys that are going to impact your business, and start there.
Yeah.
If I could, sorry, go ahead, Dina. I was going to
say that it's not only the teams, it's like the resources and investment, obviously,
Exactly.
to make it right for your business too. And so when you think about an organization, it's like, do you have the right skills that can work to do that with AEM? And do you have the right budget and time, in front of you? And I think that's where you may start to see worlds of coexistence where you're like, okay, you're going to leave your web stuff and do that there, but mobile is where you want to go focus and prove that part out, and not have to, again, wash away from the content that's sitting in those other systems, but you can still do kind of the API, and you can do the orchestration from those other systems too, to get benefit out of running and coexisting.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of Magento shops are these are still relatively small teams. And to Bill's point earlier, what Dina just shared as well, it's going to be overkill, whether it's AEM or even another large scale, more legacy or traditional CMS. Not only the effort and the services cost to get those things up and running, but those are built for really complex workflows and organizations. In many cases, industries that are highly regulated. Think of pharma, for example, that might be serving companies and clients, I should say, across many different languages and regions, and they need a high degree of compliance and workflow and approvals and so on. That's not the case, clearly, within e-commerce primarily, or certainly many of you, here today talking about how you might leverage Contentful or headless CMS in a Magento context. And it's also important to recognize that all the commerce platforms built basic CMS capability because they have to. Ironically, when I was
because Brian told them to.
Yeah, I was going to say, because when I was an analyst at Forrester, I started including content management requirements within things like the waves and so forth that I was doing, and I really pushed the vendors to support merchants and marketers trying to manage their web experiences. But really, given everything on a commerce platform, vendors' plate, they never really invested and matured the content management capabilities, and certainly don't have something like a content graph and the ability to then serve content that's highly attributed across many different touch points and be able to work with even personalization solutions more effectively to target content. So it's really been a paradigm shift, moving toward headless. And it also is much more cost efficient. These are developer friendly tools with business user interfaces on the back end. They make it a lot more efficient and effective. And it's right sized for what an e-commerce organization needs to be thinking about, with some other advantages like publishing content into other channels.
Great. Thanks for that, guys. Dina, I'm going to point this next one for you to kick us off. So, what's the business user experience like when using a solution like Contentful with a commerce platform? So again, thinking about maybe businesses that have kind of had everything in one suite, now they've got different tools. What's the day-to-day like with a business user when they're living this reality that we're talking about?
Yeah. And in this regards, it's like I can speak on, the team that I run, brand experience. And with that, I have a content team, and the content team works really closely with our web team, SEO, designers. So you get where I'm going. So I have my first-hand domain expertise, and then I obviously can talk a bit about that business user experience from my perspective, as well as what we're, building for business users as well. And so when you think about, the challenges that we run into in digital teams, it's like, how do you have the flexibility to build, the experience, or how you want your content to show up, whether you're talking about, responsive site, mobile application. And I mentioned when I did the setup around Contentful, like the key part about, kind of our premise is around content reusability, right? And reusing it directly from the source, or being able to use it from your central platform and hub of where your teams are coming together to be able to create those, use those components to create whatever that experience looks like. From a business user perspective, this is our studio line. So studio line is what we announced over a year ago. And that is really more about bringing those non-technical teams together as part of that content creation process, and bringing them out of, offline documents into a system that is just more productive with like the workflows and the permissions, so that you're not afraid you are going to break anything that your teams have set up. So it's definitely a guardrailed experience. We announced Experience Builder during our fall launch just about 2 months ago. And that Experience Builder is really solving for that, having those templates that are built within there. So structured content works extremely well with obviously pages that you can go and have created by an agency. We also have more of an off-the-shelf, here's your templates. You can import your own templates if you still want to do that. And that really starts to be able to take, again, the components that you need to, your pricing information from your commerce systems. We have it integrated with, an AI image generator, text as well. And so there's just a lot more that's brought into this user experience, so that you're able to go and kind of create with a drag and drop type of feel, but also make it look really, really highly custom based upon adding all these different elements that are coming from backend systems, or coming from your own, templated or design library and design system like Figma. And so that is really what our studio offering, and specifically Experience Builder, is like. It really starts to cut down on, your workflow and your time. It can start to save dollars, to be very honest. I think about this all the time still around like content variations that need to be produced outside of for a web page. And that's kind of the idea behind Studio, is that we have these different jobs that need to be done, where you're talking about, direct response ads, or you're talking about, your storefront. We're solving those problems within, Contentful Studio. And I think that is really also cutting back on some of the requirements that you would have with the developers and the development teams that are sitting behind the scenes.
I think, Dina, I think it's great, because I think one of the things that people often kind of identified early on in headless CMS it was somewhat developer intensive. But it's great to see how Contentful is really evolving the business user experience and making it really easy. And I think the time is really critical. I mean, you talked earlier about the holiday and Black Friday and so on, and the pressure to really update and keep your experience, alive with how your merchandising and promotions and marketing need to evolve rapidly, in rapid response mode, especially this time of year. You don't want to have, steps in the way, or have to publish content that, takes hours. You need it to be done now. And I think that's one of the advantages that Contentful can offer. And then with the business user tooling, really enabling the business to do that on their own and make that change quickly.
Great. Bill, any final thoughts on that one from the business user experience? Dina gave us a good deep dive there.
Yeah, it's covered it well. I feel like the point that's important is it's really dependent on the size of the team. So, you can have a small team or a larger team, but having tooling that enables business users, as Brian said, to really update and keep the site fresh, and not necessarily have to involve IT. That's a big difference.
Yeah. Okay, Dina, I'm coming back to you again. So
Okay.
you guys have one particular customer that I've always found interesting in Rafa. So I'm an avid road cyclist, a longtime Rafa customer. I think I remember buying from them like 2008, 2009 when they
How
first
come you're not wearing your
first started
lycra
out.
now? How come you're
I
not
don't know.
wearing
I
your
probably should. Probably should have been on brand for this question, right? So. But yeah, like you guys have got a lot of interesting case studies and publicly available information about them. But I just
Yeah.
wanted to hear kind of from your perspective, like, what their composable journey is like. A lot of us here on this call knew them as a Hybris customer back like around 2015-ish, if my memory serves me. And I know they've been with you guys for a while. So just what can you share with us about their story and how they've made that transition from being on a monolithic all-in-one platform to being kind of the leading edge and a great shining example of a brand that's living the composable journey.
Yeah, I really have enjoyed spending time with Nick Fletcher over at Rafa. He leads the digital experience practice there, and I actually felt like I was part of like a groupie system when we were hanging out. We were over in Cologne, speaking at an event together, and it's amazing how many people come out of the woodworks with their Rafa gear. Not necessarily
Yeah.
but like definitely the backpacks and the socks and everything else. So I felt like I was part of this like popularity contest with them. So,
Yeah.
but yes, Rafa. So Rafa, for those of you that may not know some facts about Rafa, they have 23 clubhouses around the world, from LA to Berlin to Seoul. They have over like 25,000 members that are part of their Rafa cycling club. And they do so much within the community. And that's one thing that's like super important about some of these customers that we're working with. It's more than what they sell. It is really about their story. And Rafa, in that case, is one of those brands. They inspire the world to live by bike. And that really is their value. And so the technology decisions that Nick and team have made are really about bringing that vision to life for them and their brand purpose. And so when you start to think about how technology fits into that, they spend a lot of time explaining to me that, they are really trying to differentiate their shopper journey, really. And the brand storytelling mission that they have has been one of those ways that they've been able to do this. And so they approached their commerce kind of problems and their opportunities in a different light. They really focused more on, they're starting out with focusing more on, their existing customers and the stories and the way that they could create that community and connection, and bringing those into a mobile experience. And then they've kind of worked backwards to where they're now bringing in, their merchandise and all of those other, their classes and things of that nature. And so they started on their journey through mobile. And granted, when they were evaluating and making this shift to a more modern kind of approach for their Rafa Cycling Club, it was pre-COVID. And that actually impacted some of the decisions that they were making in real time as well, where they were looking to make this more about community meetups and cycling and events. And now they started to make it more about classes. And then they started to make it more about transaction and kind of the purchasing journey. And so it's been really neat to see, their brand kind of evolve there. So what did they think about? They were thinking about the legacy technology replacements that they needed, to kind of address. There were many of them that had kind of a bad rap. I'm not going to go down the path of who those were and what they were, but they really, took a hard look at their technology. But what Nick said day in and day out is it was about getting stakeholder alignment. And he had to get buy-in around that recommendation to move away from the legacy tech stack. And that was kind of near and dear for some of the things that they proved out to do. They felt that their commerce platform was too rigid. It was costly. It was maintenance heavy. It kind of lacked the ability to have unified storage for both mobile and web content assets. And it didn't really hit on creating an engaging experience for their club members. And so as part of all of those, it was more than just a website. For them, it was also thinking about how could this technology decision connect into in-store devices, to their app? And so they really were thinking about this at the foundational level. So as a result of some of the things that they did, obviously they chose to come with us because of those mix and match components with the architecture. They were really keen, of course, to have a mobile app and an e-commerce website that worked hand in hand. And then they were looking for a partner and technologies that had ease of integration of working with other technology tools. So in this case, translations, analytics, commerce layer as well was brought to the table. And so that's really why they went down this path with us. And, they were able to do the launch in 10 weeks. And that should speak some volumes in terms of, as you talk about some of the speed or the reasons why to consider moving to a composable approach. Again, you can't just necessarily just buy it off the shelf, but in this case, they were very specific about the problems they were solving in the first wave of bringing this mobile app to market. And they were able to prove out the results, see success, and then they built on from there. So yeah, those are some of the highlights.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that story. It's definitely an interesting one for us. So guys, I'm going to go into the last kind of discussion point here, and Bill, we'll start with you on this one. We've talked about what's possible here. We've kind of picked apart some of the interesting aspects of thinking about content from a composable strategy, but it's not all a bed of roses here. So, what I think the question that we wanted to discuss here is like, what are some of the typical pain points that businesses experience when starting on their composable journey? And we actually got a similar question from the audience as well. And I'm just going to read this because it's another way to frame this up. David's saying there's rumbles in the industry that composable multi-vendor commerce platforms are harder to implement, manage, and support. Monolith is easier. It's also saying there's not necessarily his words, just things that he hear. But I'd love to hear about kind of the pain points, the challenges, the pitfalls, and what we should consider from the more challenging side of taking on this journey here as well. So Bill, give us your thoughts to start off.
Sure. And I love the audience narrative and question on that, because, the idea of easier is you're not necessarily going to have the level of flexibility. And I think one of the things that Brian and I are finding, and consistent with my experience, is at the end of the day, a lot of the considerations, they need to be led by what are your business requirements in terms of how you're going to grow the company, what are the digital experiences, what's the brand message, what are the channels, all the types of things that are where you're going versus where you're at in terms of thinking about it. But often the types of things that people need to consider and understand start with data. Like, where's the data coming from, and how are they going to leverage that data to deliver those experiences to drive their business? And I think composability at its most simple level doesn't really say how to do that. And it really is something that I think you need to realize that it's not just a technology discussion. It's really something that needs to be planned for and architected, in my opinion. So, you may be able to just access through APIs the data you need, and but in other cases you may need to consolidate and integrate the information and even transform it into a usable view to really deliver those experiences. So I think what is probably going to be a critical factor in moving from a very legacy approach to either taking small incremental or larger steps is stepping back, looking at your data, looking at the experiences that you want to deliver, and architect a roadmap that makes sense. And that's where I throw out really, a call out to work with the right kind of partner that's going to help you do that, because it's not just buying a tool that's got features that solve for all those things.
Yeah, I'm gonna just chime in a little bit back to the audience question too. I think there's to a large degree, it's true that if you're going to go full mock leverage all API first SaaS solutions and try to bring that together inside of an experience or many different experiences, you're adding some complexity. You're adding some complexity in terms of integration across multiple different vendors, managing those vendors, and architecting and leveraging things like GraphQL to drive a performant experience. So that is true. There's a lot of advantages, which is why you do see organizations, moving that direction. But what we're talking about here with composability is not necessarily that. This is about complementing, in many cases, the investments you've already made in your existing environment and your existing commerce platforms that may be functioning in their kind of core capabilities quite well, like managing a cart, like managing checkout, like managing basic order management, and so on. But you may have needs like the ones we talked about much earlier in the call in the webinar, like content management, like personalization, search, and so on. And what we're talking about here is, bringing those elements to bear. Yes, those are point solutions that could have been integrated many years ago as well. But now you see a maturation in terms of how data is orchestrated across solutions. And that's true both in a mock context or in a composable context leveraging Magento. And you see investments from the commerce platforms to make it easier to exchange and integrate exchange data and integrate third-party solutions. So I think this is as much about an evolution as it is a revolution when it comes to leveraging SaaS-based API-first solutions and blending those into your environments. And certainly Bill brought up, a really important point, which is it's really about the pain points and the business opportunities around those things. And certainly we see these days investment is moving towards the solutions that are complementing, legacy investments and existing infrastructure around the e-commerce business. And that's super valid. And that's how I think most organizations should be thinking. But certainly you want to be investing in the solutions that are going to enable you to be as agile as possible, move fast and efficiently with, still what are relatively small teams, both on the development and marketing and merchandising side. So I think we're talking about here kind of two different things when we talk about composability versus kind of going all in.
Dina, we're creeping to the top of the hour here, but any final thoughts for the group on the typical pain points and challenges?
Yeah, I think that just like one other angle to this too is like, no matter like how well vetted the software is, like it's not, is it ever going to perfectly align to the needs of the business? And so I say this in the respect that sometimes taking a little bit more time up front to get hands-on with it, and to understand what the possibilities are that are out of the box capabilities, to define which vendors and technologies that you're going to need to integrate with. Doing that work up front as part of a POC might add a little bit more time, but then you're not locked into something that isn't as flexible to meet your needs. And then you're not forking over so much, right? And so many years to get it right. And so that's just one thing to think about too. I think in the respect of multi-vendor, kind of use cases and stacks, yes, they're harder to implement, but I think if you're asking the right questions and understanding, the business needs up front and thinking about those things, allowing yourself to go and do the hands-on work that needs to be done, I think it can help to pay dividends off once you make that switch over to composable. And so that's probably the thing I would just kind of leave as a takeaway.
One other thing, I think it's one other thing I'd love to add just really briefly is, much of what makes it more complex as well today is we're trying to meet the requirements based on where these sites and integrations and so forth are today. Meaning that when you may have first launched your Magento site or Hybris site or what have you, it may have been relatively straightforward and you were able to get live with an MVP. Now, when you go to re-platform or what have you, you're trying to not only meet the current capabilities and integrations that you have, but you're trying to move beyond that. So it's really important, as Dina talked about a POC, really think about implementation of these kinds of solutions with fairly concise requirements and use cases, and then build on them and make it more about a program than a big bang project, right? Launch. And really think back to the best practices that we had to learn the hard way many years ago around e-commerce site launches, and really think about taking a more incremental programmatic approach to building on success, as Dina said, and then progressing and becoming more sophisticated in how you leverage these tools and use them in your organization. You know, and it's just a function of how mature and complex the businesses have become, that we're trying to obviously you know, do a lot when we approach these kinds of technology integrations.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thanks everyone for their thoughts and discussion here. Holly, if we could just quickly go back to the last 4 slides in the deck here, that'd be great. Yeah, guys, just wanted to thank everyone. You know, this thank you from Cocktails and Commerce here from Brian and Bill. Guys, you want to have a quick word on the newsletter here as well? You want to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, Bill and I are really enjoying sharing our enthusiasm and love for cocktails and our industry perspective on commerce and commerce tech and the overall sort of ecosystem. We define commerce very broadly. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. It is free. And certainly would love to bring you in to share some of our enthusiasm for not only great cocktails, but the history around them. And would love to have you subscribe. If you're a commerce tech or services business, obviously there's other ways we can engage as well. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Bill. And big thank you to Contentful and Dina for joining us today. ITG Commerce is a new Contentful partner, and we're excited to be working together with you guys, and really appreciated the time and energy that you guys brought today as well. And then just lastly, thanks, Dina. Lastly, just, you know, again, thanks to ITG Commerce for presenting this. That's me and my contact information. If anyone has any needs or thoughts or questions afterwards, you're welcome to reach out. And appreciate the time and from all the presenters and all the attendees and being here today. I hope you enjoyed the cocktails if you had them, and we'll see you guys all soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you all who joined us.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.